Good evening. My name is Kim Colvin. I am the board secretary, and I'd like to call this meeting to order. With the absence of our board president and vice president at tonight's meeting, our first order of business is to elect a president pro tem to preside over tonight's meeting. To do this, we need nominations and then a vote. I will first take nominations, and once all nominations have been made and accepted, a ballot vote will be taken. There is no needed for a second when a nomination is made. Are there any nominations for a director to serve as president pro tem for tonight's meeting?
Yeah, I nominate Jane Finch.
I accept.
Are there any other nominations? Well, with no other nominations and only having one nominations, we can do a verbal vote instead of a ballot vote. So Director Finch has been nominated and has accepted the nomination to serve as president pro tem for tonight's meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? With that, I now turn this meeting over to Director Finch to serve as president pro tem for tonight's meeting.
Thank you very much. I was advised to move to the middle of the table. The gavel? Where's the gavel?
Maybe in the drawer.
Right. Okay. Good evening and welcome to the regular meeting for the ICCSD Board of Directors this Tuesday, November 14th, 2023. Thank you to all who are attending tonight and watching at a later date. We heartily welcome your continued engagement with our district. First up, sorry, I need to read this first. The public is reminded that if they wish to speak, they need to complete a speaker form found at the table in the lobby and turn it in. During community comment, persons may speak to the board about topics relevant to the district. All community comment directed at non-agenda items and agenda items shall take place at the beginning of the meeting during community comment section of the agenda. And before we get started, let me introduce all of those at the table with me tonight. To my right is Superintendent Matt Degner, Directors Pilcher-Hayek and Eastham, and to my left, Directors Abraham and Clausen, and Board Secretary Kim Colvin. First up are our student representatives, and we'll start with City High tonight, Lulu and Rose.
Hi, everyone.
Good to see you. All right, we'll start with our news. So swimming placed 8th in state, which is our big first proud accomplishment. Also, City High proudly holds Solon students with us on our swim team. And a student, a Little Hawk swimmer, won 2 championships in the free 550 and free 100-meter relay, which is really exciting.
The Little Hawk, which is also our school's publication, was awarded one of the 5 Iowa News Teams of the Year awards.
We also had our Fall Play Baguettes, Fall of a High School Ronin, which is groundbreaking because it's the first time it's ever been done in Iowa, and it proudly displays an open gay relationship, which is a big thing. It's really exciting.
Cross country, ooh. Cross country girls also got 4th out of over 100 teams in Nike Cross Regionals.
The end of the trimester art show also happened today, which is really exciting. It displayed our visual arts department, and there are seriously over 700 works in that art studio, because there's got periods every single day, 30 plus students, and they all have to submit 2+ pieces, 700. It's incredible. Also,
Yeah, our City High also advanced treble choir, I think, is performing at the Iowa School Board Convention. I think tomorrow. Yeah,
they're
tomorrow
going
and
to Des Moines.
Thursday.
It's
So
pretty exciting.
yes.
Freshman class went to the Career Expo in Cedar Rapids, I think last week or a week before. Sophomore
Sometime.
class went to the Kirkwood Career Caravan, and that's coming up, which is really exciting. And the junior class had a safe driving presentation, which was sponsored by the state of Iowa, and it was pretty good. My sister won, so she got a lottery prize. She's really excited.
And our initiative, Adopt the Yearbook, now has an alumni donation of $1,500.
Yeah, the
and
Alumni
yes.
Association.
So we're very excited that right now we can cover around 82 yearbooks for seniors that cannot afford one at the end of the year.
Also, City High officially has a Quiz Bowl team. Yes, Quiz Bowl. It got off the ground. It's a brand new activity. It started because the junior highs had a team that placed in nationals, which was
Yeah.
really exciting. And so we brought it to the high school level. And we had 3+ teams compete, I think, 2 weekends ago.
So the freshmen are better than the seniors.
Yes,
but-
they are.
Oh, and then robotics had some sort of competition, I think, and City High hosted over 10 schools.
It's become like
big
a
news.
regional robotics hub. Because
Yeah.
we also have robotics fight clubs. So if you're interested in class entertainment, you get that too. It's really exciting.
Yes.
But yeah, I think that's,
Well,
oh, yes.
banned books. We also have a group of students that will be giving a public statement later on banned books.
Yeah, and regarding that legislation and district policy.
Yes. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lulu and Rose. Next up is Liberty High, Kai, and Oriana.
Hello, this is Kai. Oriana could not be here tonight. Our first trimester is coming to an end, making Liberty very busy. The first thing is that our French and SEAL biliteracy classes had their first visit to Kirkwood Elementary earlier this month. It's an effort to teach younger elementary school students foreign language, and we're going to have 4 additional visits throughout the school year. Also for SEAL biliteracy, Spanish 4 and 5, celebrated Dia de los Muertos by creating altars throughout the school building. Students were able to present photos of loved one, pets, or famous people that were important to them. The All-State Music Festival is taking place later this week. We had a new record of 27 students throughout the band, orchestra, and choir programs make it. Each student put countless hours into challenging music in an intense competitive environment. And yes. Our fall play, Radium Girls, took place at the end of October. The theater department took a different approach with this play by covering a more serious topic. The play describes the real situation of the Radium Girls, in which 3 girls who worked at a radium plant where they painted dials with the radium ended up getting radium poisoning, and the play is about them suing their company. Our casting crew, being over 50 students, worked hard to put on an impactful show that represented this difficult experience of standing up for yourself despite the odds. Our BLSU club, Black Latino Student Union, received an Iowa Character Award honorable mention for student organization of character. This award demonstrates BLSU upholds 6 pillars of character: trustworthiness, respect, responsibility, fairness, caring, and leadership. So congratulations to BLSU for your work in promoting diversity in our student body. And finally, our student athletic groups have been working hard throughout their seasons. Boys cross country in one of their recent meets on October 27th finished 6th, with senior Aiden Decker becoming the 2nd individual medalist and first 4-time state qualifier in school history. The Trojan Bolt girls swim team also won the Valley Division and overall MVC Conference Championship during late October. Congratulations to them as well, and we'll be looking forward to more winter athletics soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Guy. Next up is Evan from Tate High.
Hello, my name is Evan Noriega, and I am the student representative for Tate High School. We have had some exciting happenings at Tate. The Raptor Center presented to our science classes. They brought a vulture, a barn owl, and a peregrine falcon for students to learn hands-on. Sadly, I wasn't there, so. But it was very cool, though, from what I've heard from the students. Tate hosted a volleyball game with Cedar Rapids Metro during 6th period on Wednesday, 10/18. The entire school and staff came out to support our volleyball players. We lost 3 games, but we had fun. We plan to host more volleyball games throughout the year. We will hold our end of the trimester PBIS Awards Assembly, honoring those with academic honors, good attendance, and way of the warrior of each advisory. We are welcoming 13 new students to Tate for trimester 2, starting Monday, 11/20. Our PBIS data shows that shows that students receive 15 positive to one redirect. These positive recognitions include postcards home, positive office referrals, positive email homes, student of the month and all nominees, and PBIS tickets. Tomorrow, Tate will have a Thanksgiving dessert table with pies, dessert, and treats for all students and staff. We are so grateful for Tate High School. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Evan. And last, we have Cindy from West High.
Hello. So I'm here to update you about some current updates at West High. So first off, it's everyone's favorite week, finals week. So I have some plans for tonight. To update, we had 3 individual girl qualifiers for cross country, and then we had 5 individual qualifiers for boys cross country. And so they raced at the state championships like 2 weeks ago. And then we had an amazing turnout at West Girls State Swimming. So we got 6th place overall. Camila Swanson of diving got 3rd overall. And then we also had Colby Reese and Hannah Gang, who got 4th at state. Now that fall sports are over, winter sports are officially in session. So that's exciting. Construction is also going very smoothly at West. I finally see like some doors. So it was good to see that instead of like wood and construction everywhere. Some fun things that happened recently. West Student Government had a Spirit Week, and on Friday was Barbie/Pink Out Day. We ended up having a fundraiser for breast cancer awareness, which we raised $600, more than $600. West High Composting Club has adopted a composting trash cans outside, throughout our schools. So they're planted across like the trash cans by lunch. So instead of throwing away like our plates or apples, we just put them in those bins and they compost them. So that's pretty cool. All-State Orchestra is this Thursday to Saturday. West High had a total of 42 musicians make it to All-State. We had 12 band students, 4 choir students, and 26 orchestra students. At the Iowa High School Press Association's conference, West Side's story was named All Iowa News Team of the Year, and the Trojan Epic Yearbook received awards for design, photography, and writing. And the West High Math places first at the Math League State Qualifier with 3 individual first places. We are also doing the Christmas Carol with Theater West, and that's coming up super soon. And we had 5 seniors sign and commit to their schools this past, I forgot the day, but they signed. So that was super exciting to see. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. And now we'll move on to the ICAA update with Brady Shutt.
Thanks. Interim President Finch, Directors, Superintendent Degner. It is great to be here. It's my pleasure also to thank all of the candidates who ran for the school board, and also to especially, of course, congratulate the winners in the recent election, Charlie Easton, Lisa Williams, and Molly Abraham, the 3 incumbents who we look forward to continuing our work with you on the board, and then also the challenger, Mitch Lingo. We look forward to his time on the board as well. We were successful, the Iowa City Education Association teachers and paras, as well as the Iowa City Physical Plant Association in our recent recertification votes. So that was exciting. It was a very big endeavor. I'd like to publicly thank our ICEA leadership team. It was really a building-based grassroots effort, and they did a fantastic job, as well as Jane Ellerding, our regional director, who was instrumental in our success. And one thing that I did hear from a lot of people, because it really is open to anyone in the bargaining unit. They don't have to be a member of the association. And one thing that was good for me to hear in my role was how many people, when they reached out, said, you know what we really appreciate is the collaborative partnership that you have with the school board, with the administrative teams, and with the community. And that's certainly a point of pride for us as an association. So thanks to all of you for your part in that. And I think, we're going to have some challenging conversations or see some challenging data tonight. And I just want you to know, Director Easton, you asked this at the previous meeting, we certainly will be engaged and be your partner as we work through this process. And, I have full confidence that that will be the case from the district as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Brady. We'll move on to community comment. Thank you for your interest in Iowa City Community School District and for your willingness to share your comments. You are reminded to give your name, address, and topic on which you would like to speak. During community comment, persons may speak to the board about topics relevant to the district. Speakers who make comments are reminded they are responsible for their own statements and may be subject to legal action for those which are threatening, harassing, or defamatory in nature. It is expected that speakers will address the board and each other with civility and abide by the stated time limits. All community comment directed at non-agenda items and agenda items shall take place at the beginning of the meeting and shall be limited to 4 minutes per speaker. The initial community comment period shall be limited to 1 hour. Remaining community comment, to the extent necessary, shall take place at the end of the meeting. The board will not engage in any discussion during community comment. The role of the board during this time is to listen. And first up, we have Owen Noble.
Sorry, I'm bad with these. Ask any adolescent why we sent our young man to die in Europe, men nearly their age, and they can tell you. They can speak of the Nazi death camps, the destruction of Jewish property. Ask an adolescent why we sent just as many young men into the Pacific to die fighting the Japanese, and they are at a loss for words. No talk of what Japan did. No talk of why that war needed to be fought. Pearl Harbor is the extent of the knowledge of our youth on what the atrocities Japanese committed. I respect our veterans. When they were called upon, they stood up, suited up, fought, and died for us. I respect them because I know what they fought for, what they fought against. When I heard that one of the books being banned from our libraries is The Rape of Nanking, I was immediately shocked that the state would attempt to censor the evils of a nation we fought to destroy. A nation we stood up to when they proceeded with something we knew was wrong. What the Japanese Empire did in China was so heinous. The killing competitions, the body desecration, the rapes, the murders, the human experimentation, that Nazi advisors to China felt sick. So I come here today asking our lawmakers, why would they cover up for Japan? Why should we hide what an enemy of the United States did? What would our soldiers, the young boys sitting beneath the sands of Iwo Jima and Okinawa, think if they knew that kids just a few years younger than themselves do not know why they fought, why they died? We cannot honor our veterans without understanding what they were fighting for. And I think it is truly disgraceful that our lawmakers wish to drown out the atrocities that these men gave it all to end. The state of Iowa has spit upon the graves of American heroes today, and I am ashamed to be living in a state where facts are not allowed to flourish. Thank you.
Thank you, Owen. Next up is Rena Roach.
Hello. I'm a student at City High School. I'm a senior this year, and I've been involved in a lot of equity work with the school district. So I'm aware that the school district is trying its very best to respond to the discriminatory legislation that is coming out of the Capitol. By Capitol, I mean Des Moines. But recently, there was a new policy that the district put in place to limit the books that students could read during independent reading time. This is not removing books from school libraries. This is nothing like that. This is language that is explicitly different and more restrictive than what Des Moines has required us to do. I think this is a ridiculous policy that we are only putting in place because we are scared of what is going to happen to us. And I understand that the SF 496 is a very scary bill because it can harm our teachers. And I appreciate that you guys and everyone involved in the district, including the equity department, is trying to respond the best it can to protect our teachers, because the teachers that are being most threatened by this bill are the teachers that I know are most important to keep in our schools. But I think adding on to these already discriminatory, restrictive policies is not helping anyone, least of all our students. So I think it is important that we recognize that the bill does have limitations and we need to follow those guidelines. But out of fear, we should not be restricting our students even further. I know that independent study might not seem like the biggest deal to people who aren't in school, but for many, many kids, the time that teachers set aside as an assignment, as a grade to read books is the only time that they are reading because they have so much stuff going on or they just don't care about reading. So the freedom to really read what kids want and what they need to be reading is critical. If you do not let children read books about diverse sexualities, diverse experiences, understand consent through literature, through age-appropriate literature that might not be what Kim Reynolds deems as appropriate, it is actually harming them. And I understand, I appreciate the amount of work that the school district is doing, but I think that in this instance, they have, out of fear, tried to go too far when they did not need to. So I think it's important that we are really looking at these policies and saying the direct language in the bill, which I know is vague, and I know we're trying to work on getting the Department of Education to provide greater guidelines, but I think it is critical that we do not go too far before we're even told that we have to. So I hope that you guys have heard what I have to say and understand that this is something students are talking about. Even if the district isn't telling us explicitly, if my principal, Mr. Bacon, isn't sending out an email that they're adding this policy, we find out. We have students whose parents are teachers. We have teachers who are willing to say, I got this email, what is happening, right? So we know what's happening, we're talking about it, and we're really worried about it because we know what's happening at the state legislature. But we also know what you guys are doing, and we know that you have power, and I would ask that you take it to protect our students and grant us access to the resources that we deserve instead of restricting it before we're even told we have to. Thank you.
Thank you, Raina. Next up is Sebastian Sander.
As a student at Iowa City High School and a kid who grew up in the Iowa City Community School District, the accessibility of books in my English classroom involving sexuality and gender was something that directly influenced my life greatly as a trans and gay kid. In middle school, when I was really lost, I was not doing well. I was confused about a lot. I turned to my English class library and my school class mandated independent reading time, and I read only queer books for about an entire year. I didn't know why for most of that year, but those books and the impressions they left taught me that I wasn't alone when I realized who I was. And throughout my years of coming into myself and my high school years when I hated myself or when I had no hope or no picture of my future as a queer student, I turned once again to these books. And they said that people like me existed and that they had a future and a life. They let me picture that, and they saved me in many ways. I want you to understand that the alternative to these books was not and was never going to be my turning out normal or different. It was killing myself. Thank you.
Thank you, Sebastian. Next up, Sadie Bodson.
Okay. It's very important to have conversations about safe sex and gender identity at a young age. Doing this destigmatizes sex and helps younger people figure out more things about their identity. SF 496 is completely out of touch with reality. It is ridiculous to assume that young adults do not consume erotic material or have sex. Books that destigmatize these topics and discuss consent and safety are important for teenagers to read. Taking them out of school libraries is harmful to youth. We are young adults We can discern what we can and cannot read without the help of bureaucratic bodies telling us. Of course, as a school district, you are following policy. However, as students, we are pushing to fight these bans and show resistance to the harm being done to our school libraries. Addressing the district's particular policy on student independent reading being restricted and surveyed, it is not written in the legislature that you need to do that. It is hurting students. And then I just want to talk a little bit about a specific book that was banned that impacted me and I feel like a lot of young adults. The Handmaid's Tale explores topics of feminism and female empowerment that are very important for teens to be exposed to. And I think that teens, and especially young women, should be encouraged to learn about the topics discussed in this book. And it's important for an impressionable audience like young women to learn about women who have the strength to rise up against those in power and fight for their rights. Thank you.
Thank you, Sadie. Next up, Yomi Hemley.
I'd just like to talk about a book that was recently banned that also impacted me and I also really liked. Like The Song of Achilles. I think it's really stupid that it was banned because gay representation is already scarce in media in general, so banning them in books would further outcast LGBTQ people in our society, in our schools, especially when young people are trying to figure themselves out more and stuff. It's extremely important for young people in the LGBTQ community and just young people in general to have representation of people like them, and having a book where people in history are gay normalizes gay people and helps young people accept their identity, helps me accept my identity and just all teens like me, so.
Thank you, Yomi. Next we have Janan Abudega.
Hello, I'm a student at West High School, a school that celebrates diversity. I'm extremely lucky to have been able to interact with many different cultures in my educational experience. I'm Palestinian American with family in the Gaza Strip. I've traveled to Gaza many times, mostly during times of peace. However, the restriction to access of food, water, and electricity shows the struggles of that area even during times of peace. Many people of different backgrounds can recognize that the people of this area are quite literally losing their lives. I don't have time to provide all of the context related to this issue, but I'm here to talk to you guys about the genocide of my people, the Palestinian people. In the past month or so, 11,000 Palestinians have been killed, which is more than the civilian death toll in Ukraine since that conflict started. Only 13 of the instigators of the attacks on October 7th have been killed. This is clearly an attack on the people. While this is out of our control and 7,000 miles away, our school district is indirectly funding these attacks by selling Domino's Pizza at the Iowa City Community School District cafeterias. Domino's has publicly expressed their support for Israel. This places them on the BDS, Boycott, Diversity, and Sanctions list, a global campaign for promoting various forms of boycott against Israel until it meets its obligations under international law towards Palestinians. You all already told me that there's nothing you can do about it due to the bidding process and contracts you have with Domino's. I urge you to reconsider your process and take legal action to get this to change. Me and 146 other students urge you to consider that what our school public funding is going to. Apart from the Iowa City Community School District community, we are part of the Iowa City Community School District, a community known for its commitment to justice and equity. We believe our actions should reflect these values when making it seemingly small decisions like choosing where we source our food from. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Janan. Next, Joseph Dobrian.
Joseph Dobrian, 1015 2nd Avenue. As the board begins a new term, it's time to review this school district's goals and priorities. We've often heard from educational administrators in this district that diversity is our strength and that equity is our top priority. Those statements are grave errors. Diversity is our strength is an empty bromide unless we define the goals we have in mind and explain why diversity conduces to those goals. I suggest that diversity of immutable characteristics, such as race, for example, is a neutral value. And diversity of irreconcilable values and goals is a detriment. It's certainly not a strength if we are all pulling in different directions and using diversity as an excuse to regard one another with prejudice or even hatred. As for equity being our top priority, if we strive for equal outcomes for all of our students, we will certainly deprive all of our students of the best possible outcome. I advise you to make academic excellence your top priority so that each individual student will have the opportunity to achieve the best outcome that he or she could expect to achieve. Man's greatest desire is food. Next to that, our greatest desire is meaning. Many Americans, especially young Americans, are desperate for meaning in their lives, but they cannot find any. This I attribute to three factors: affluence relative to the rest of the world, hopelessness, and secularism. There's nothing wrong, of course, with affluence, so long as it doesn't make you lazy and complacent, but it often does. And this conduces to amorality and the worship of material luxury. Hopelessness comes from not having anything to believe in, except evil lies that take away any glimmer of hope, such as the myths of systemic racism and apocalyptic climate change. American students today are taught to disdain and even hate America, the greatest society this planet has ever seen. They are taught to dismiss the traditional American family, which is rooted in values such as freedom and responsibility. They are taught to regard government and school administrators as more trustworthy than their own parents. They are taught that religion leads to bigotry, intolerance, and oppression. They are taught to worship illusory and insubstantial ideals such as diversity and equity. This mixture of affluence, hopelessness, and secularism has led to nihilism, or nihilism, whichever way you choose to pronounce it, which results in a desire to destroy, as an angry child might kick over another child's carefully constructed sandcastle. That is the situation that you face in this coming term. I urge you to renounce and abandon meaningless concepts, and therefore destructive concepts, such as diversity and equity, and instead help children to find meaning in their lives by instilling a love of objective truth rather than imposing a social agenda. God love you.
Thank you. And last, we have Janice Weiner.
Good evening. When I spoke at the City Council meeting last week about the dangers of hate speech, I cited Elie Wiesel, who said the opposite of love is not hate, it's indifference. We live in a time when anti-Semitic vitriol and acts are expanding exponentially, both at home and abroad. Free speech is a cornerstone of our society. At the same time, we all benefit when we consider the impact of our words. We have a unique responsibility to educate about just that, as the algorithms of social media push certain narratives that are often far removed from objective news. It's always easier to hate and blame, easier to search for a scapegoat than to seek to understand complex problems. We humans have the ability to hold space for multiple complex truths. Your email on potential demonstrations last week stated, quote, "Our commitment is to foster an environment for all students and staff that acknowledges and respects diverse perspectives while promoting empathy, understanding, and open dialogue," end quote. That's both an incredibly important goal and a heavy lift. Let's all take it on. Every student, every staff member deserves to feel safe. Right now, that may not be the case. Some hide their identities, some stay in their classrooms. And right now, I'm not talking about the LGBTQA community, I'm talking about some Jewish students. No one here is responsible for the war between Israel and Hamas. But we are responsible for learning, teaching, and for tough conversations. It is up to us all, at home and at school, to take on these hard jobs, to be there for one another, and it is up to us all to never be indifferent. Thank you.
Thank you, Janice. We'll move on to the regular agenda.
Excuse me, Interim President Finch.
Sure.
I just wanted to say it's one of my last full meetings, so I just want to mention that we're here because of students and the students that came to speak at public comment. Whenever they come, we're so grateful, and it takes a lot of courage to do what they did. And if any of them felt any kind of vulnerability or any kind of harm for any reason this evening, we want you to know as a board and as an admin, we are so glad you're here. We're so glad that you wanted to speak your truth to us tonight, whatever that was, whoever had their truth to speak it. Thank you for being here. And again, I'm sorry if any commenter made you feel vulnerable or threatened in any way, because you're why we are here.
Thank you for that, 100%. Okay, we'll move on to the agenda. Can we have a motion to approve the agenda for tonight?
I move to approve the agenda.
Second.
Kim, we're ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you, Kim. We'll move on to the consent agenda. First of all, did any directors have any questions about the bills? I know Director Abraham reviewed them, all 81 pages. No questions? Okay. Do any directors have any items they would like to withdraw from the consent agenda? Okay. Hearing none, can I have a motion to approve tonight's consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Kim, we're ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you, Kim. Next up is our public hearing. Director Abraham?
Now is the time and place for the public hearing on the proposed ICCSD 2024-25, 2025-26, and 2026-27 district calendars. The purpose of the public hearing is to receive public input on the district's proposed calendars. As part of a rolling 3-year calendar system, the board will approve the 24-25 district calendar and acknowledge that the draft 2025-26 and 2026-27 district calendars at the November 28th, 2023 annual meeting. Are there any comments from the board?
I actually have a question. You're designating the quarter system on the calendar for the next year, and that's strictly for the middle school model, correct?
Yes, that's for our middle schools.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Are there any comments from the public?
Okay.
Can I just mention one thing that's probably of note that I would say They are draft calendars for 25, 26, 26, 27. You'll notice that on the 26, 27 calendar, it does go into the second week of June, which is atypical for us. So again, I think that's something we're still open to feedback on, or deciding if that is something that works for our system or not. But just because of the way some of the dates fall, it does run into that second week. We talked to the calendar committee about it, but I would want to draw people's attention to that because it is different than us typically ending that first week of June.
All right, thank you. We'll close that public hearing and move on to the policy review. And I guess that's me. We reviewed the 300 series at our last P&G meeting. There were some changes to the timeline for the superintendent evaluation process, some language change to reflect the administrative team, some addition to the duties for our building's principals, including investigating allegations of employment misconduct in conjunction with HR and equity employee relations, and also to ensure consistent application of comprehensive behavior approach. There was change to language for attendance and approval of conferences for our administrators, and an additional line regarding the Iowa Board of Educational Examiners Code of Professional Conduct and Ethics. Does anyone have anything to add? Any questions or comments? Okay, all right. We'll move on to the discussion items then, and that would be our legislative priorities. Matt, do you want to kick us off with that?
You bet. I can
Okay.
open that one up. So legislative priorities, not too long ago, you submitted some survey results to the Iowa School Board Association about 4 priorities that they ask us to submit as a district. You also have attached there your Standing Strong for Public Education flyer from last school year, where those were the identified priorities for the district. And so as we approach a new legislative session in January, it's important to begin that conversation about what those priorities would be for the district. I think it's more an opportunity for you guys to discuss this evening. I think one thing to maybe note, there's some long-standing priorities that I know are important to us as a district and to our different stakeholder groups. There are potentially some opportunities for, what's the right way? Overlap in interests, maybe. When we consider things like CTE, mental health, and preschool, it seems like there is potential interest at the state level for those conversations. So just as you guys debate and discuss, those might be things that we also want to consider communicating for priorities that may have better potential to get traction in Des Moines.
I mean, it looks like we have a pretty good consensus. Did you have something to add, Dr. Collison?
No, actually, what Matt just said is kind of what I was gonna highlight as well. That I think there's some opportunities, it's good to hear, that as we want to be a district of choice, that the impact of the education savings accounts are less on us than other districts, but certainly not zero impact. And I think that that's, frankly, an opportunity to point out probably some overreach on the part of the folks who put that kind of stuff in play. Book bans being another kind of situation where, folks in Des Moines are sort of pushing these agendas that certainly don't fly in this district, but I don't think we're alone in the entire state of Iowa, that these just aren't popular things. Education savings account, I mean, basically a lot of this is taxpayers giving really wealthy folks paying for their school, right? And I don't think that's a good idea nor smart. If people choose to go to private school on their own dime, I fully support that, but certainly not on taxpayers. So I think, the more energy we put into some of these kinds of things that aren't very popular and are bad for our students, the more traction we're going to get in Des Moines, frankly.
Jane, if you don't mind, I might add, looking at the priority graph, results of the board survey on legislative priorities, I think it's important to point out that preschool, along with teacher professional development, for the two subject areas that got the highest priority in this particular survey. And as everyone knows, we are pursuing additional preschool opportunities in this district too, and hope to conclude that within the next several months.
Are we comfortable adopting these top 4 here? Were there any additional thoughts? And Matt had some ideas about CTE.
The other one I forgot to mention in the list was early literacy. I think we've received some information about training. It coincides with some of the work we're already doing PD-wise and implementation-wide for our staff. I think the tricky one there around any early literacy implementation will be based on some of the ESSA results, if it's volunteer, if it's voluntold, and what comes from the state, and then also probably just having our eyes wide open around anything that comes out of that with retention, when you look at other states that have focused on early literacy. So I should have also mentioned that one, that, continue to advocate for potentially support for early literacy, right, could be solid. I think we can all get agreement on that, but depending on how far that goes with retention measures, that there's all kinds of data that shows the retention's harmful, right? So I don't think we would advocate for that, but that could be another conversation that happens there. So sorry, that was a long-winded way to say early literacy.
Is that something that you could kind of fold into the preschool as well? I think those two, I think I did hear, was it last week or the week before, there was a group of superintendents who, in Iowa, who said that those two were their top priorities, preschool and early literacy.
Yeah, I think we could weave some of those things together. I mean, in the last one, some of those items I had mentioned are already there, and so there's probably a way to fold in some of those for sure. Yeah, I think, again, if there's any new ideas you want us to take a look at, otherwise we can start building from last year's flyer based on some of the conversation here tonight. But yep, Kristen and I will work on coupling that one together.
Okay. All right.
In President Finch, I just had one more to the conversation. I apologize. I was out debriefing with some of our students when it started, so if Superintendent Degner mentioned this already, but one that might also be worth some consideration is advocacy around free meals for all students, K-12. Did you already mention that, Matt? Oh, sorry.
No, I was saying thank you for saying that. Yeah.
So Allison talked to you all at OPS a couple of months ago, and she gave you some of the figures. The debt for our nutrition is already up $10,000 again since she met with you, so we know it continues to be a challenge. We've got some great donors in the community trying to combat that. But we also know from COVID the impact that free breakfast and lunch had for all of our students. And as Superintendent was talking about, that's one that we believe there can be some coalition around the state from members of both political parties because of the impact that can have. And so I know you have some priorities here, and that wasn't on the list, but that's also one that we think could help build consensus and really get some movements that we know would benefit children. And if not both lunch and breakfast, Allison says to focus on free breakfast. So I will just offer that up.
Okay, thank you.
Well, if I may,
Yep.
I think when we do have, as we look at this, we can focus on what we think we can be most successful in. So I'm glad you guys are bringing up items that aren't necessarily in the top, 5 or whatever we have, because as we know, we may have to make changes. If there's no chance we'll make progress on one of them, if we can make progress on free breakfast, free lunch,
Yeah, absolutely.
we're going to want to do that. So I think we got to make sure you guys keep us updated with what you're hearing, and our legislative meetings will keep updated from our legislators. But that's the way we got to be ready to pivot where we're going with it.
Yeah, important to be strategic about this, for sure. Okay. I think we can move on to the Earth and Space Science discussion.
Want me to jump in here? Is that okay, President Finch?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry. Yeah.
So Earth and Space Science, you guys had asked about it in agenda setting at our last meeting. The anticipated recommendation was that we would remove that from the junior high program of studies. It's actually a high school level class that we've been teaching at the junior high, and really the reason we would remove that from what will now be the new middle school program of studies is just based on other elective offerings that would be made available to the students. There's some history with this one, and I'm not sure I'm going to state it all accurately, but at one time we offered a Foundations of Science course, and I think that involves students being able to bypass the science course and take that in junior high. With this class, we've continued to ask the students to take 7th and 8th grade science, and then they could double up. on earth and space science their 8th grade year and get a science credit accomplished at the middle school, junior high level. I don't think there's strong emotional attachment from our team to, if we wanted to revisit that recommendation about keeping it at the middle school level. I do think there's probably some, there's challenges on both sides. And one challenge would be how it cohorts kids a little bit at the junior high or middle school level, that oftentimes a kid that's doubling up on science might be in a music offering and then an advanced math offering, and you kind of establish the same cohort of students that move throughout the school day together, and so you don't necessarily get a very reflective experience. The challenge for the kids that if they don't have that opportunity to double up at the junior high is, of course, their high school schedule becomes pretty full, and it might limit their ability to take other elective offerings. I didn't present some data to you tonight that Director Finch had asked about, because the N values on some of them are so small that it would have just been kind of messy to really present in any reasonable fashion. But we do see some evidence that that would be a complication for kids at the high school level if they weren't able to take that. So,
Wait, would you say that again? I'm not sure I caught what you meant.
yeah, so if they weren't able to double up at the junior high, the current junior high level in 8th grade, then they would now need to take that freshman science course. And so when you think about building out a full schedule for a high school student their freshman year and wanting to take language, music offering, needing to do the science now on top of math, English, social studies, all those classes, it becomes relatively difficult to fit that in. So that's the opportunity for the doubling up. I think some of our other concerns about having it at the junior high have included staffing it. It becomes a little tricky to staff, and this is also attached to that cohort idea that we're offering one section or two sections, and so when the principals work with their science staff about how to do that, that's a single period. They're kind of planning the rest of the schedule around, which creates some complications. So I'm sure Lucas and Carmen also have maybe some other things I just kind of glossed over here, but I think if you have questions or if you have a direction you want to point us in, I think we're happy to consider that before we present some recommendations to you at the program of studies. But and if I didn't answer your question, I'm happy to try again. But I think that was a little bit of some of the conversation we've had since the last meeting.
I just am thinking in terms of a parent. This is my 3rd kid going through junior high. The slower you can make it, and showing us the trajectory and the different ways that trajectory goes depending on what you take. Every student is so different, every kid. I mean, I've got 3, they all have different trajectories. So just for the community and for board members, if you could it's for some of us, for some learners, it's good if you just give us the examples of, if you take this and this, because you're super into science and you're a great saxophonist, this is what that would look like, or this is what it could look like. I think that would be helpful for some of us to understand, but again, that's just my way of learning it, so I'm not speaking for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. If you're an orchestra, choir, there's 2 out of 7. A foreign language is 3, and now you have time for your 4 core, right? So there's no art in that. Where does PE fit in? I mean, at some point, it is just a matter of there's only so much time in the day. And, as a parent of someone who's going to take all of the music things and wants to take foreign language and all of the art classes and anything theater related, you're only going to have so much time in the day. I guess for me, though, just from a bigger perspective, if I think about, right, we're moving towards a guaranteed and viable curriculum, I hope there's less need for these sort of standalone. Now, math is different, right? There is, to get to calculus A, B, B, C, there's going to be a progression, right? That's probably not going to be covered. Like calculus, we're probably not going to say is guaranteed viable for everyone. Like there's going to be some outliers, I think, and it's pretty hard to build on that. Science is a more, you teach a lot of things in science, and whether you call it earth, space science, or foundations of science, we're going to hit the standards is what we're going to do. And then in a guaranteed and viable curriculum, you hope that everyone, all of the students in your core subjects are getting everything that you're offering because it's guaranteed and it's viable. I get how math leads to some really advanced things, and maybe it's different, maybe not. This is why we pay people money who are experts in this field to work all this out. But I hope, we can get less of this sort of this group, as Matt said. If you get this cohorting of kids, at what point does that start? And then at what point do we have tracks? I mean, that's sort of the, to me, we're coming from this sort of system where we used to track kids pretty blatantly, and we don't do that anymore. And so, to me, this feels a little bit like a holdout there. Also understanding what it's just time in the day, and you can only take so many things. And if you're a student who wants to take all of these extra electives, it's a challenge. And I hope through GVC we can get there, and not have to have sort of these outliers in junior high or now in middle school.
I could certainly channel some of the people that have been reaching out to us, who would say back, my kid happens to be really good at math and science, and them becoming part of a cohort of other students that are just exceptional in those areas is not a reason to not let them do it. In other words, cohort experience, I understand tracking because we were kids back when tracking was the word used, right? But I don't think we're really acknowledging at this point in our discussion the complaints we're hearing from the parents of students that really found their way in those excelled classes. I don't have an answer to this. I'm just saying I'm not hearing both sides right now, just yet. So, and I'm not good at articulating both sides because it's not this isn't my thing.
I just want to reflect back to the conversation we had tonight at our 5 o'clock financial oversight committee, where we talked about the impact of education savings accounts having on our district and our net positive open enrollment. And a lot of those students we get from Clear Creek. And the secondary students, the primary reason that I'm hearing is that they come for the AP classes. That's the reason we get these open enrollments in from that neighboring district and probably some others as well. And so, again, we're thinking about the budget, our enrollment. I do worry that taking away this opportunity is going to have a detrimental impact on our enrollment. I also worry that it may have a detrimental impact on some of our award-winning programs that we have, that we love to brag about, our music programs and our journalism programs. And if, one less room in the day for electives, I think we're going to see a detrimental impact in the enrollment in some of those electives. So I would urge us to keep it for now on the program of studies. I don't think this year is the year to do away with it. I worry about what that will do to our enrollment and to some of our programs in the secondary level.
Looks like you want me to say something, okay.
No, that was good. That was a good other side to it. And this is curriculum stuff. This is why it's hard I can't vote either way on that, not that we're voting, but this is a complicated issue. And just as much as we care about enrollment, and Jane and I had a conversation on the phone the other day, and we don't necessarily get along on this issue just because I'm still understanding it. But I agree. Our AP classes are important. They do draw people in. It is what we brag about. It's a big part of what we brag about, at least, right? I also care if we can if it works into our organizational plan when we're talking about our budget. It seems like a lot of balancing to do, so I feel like there's 1,000 pieces of information that go into that decision, or maybe 100, and I feel like I have 3. So that's where I am on it, and I don't know what the next steps are in this process. Maybe you guys are already done with this year. I'm not exactly sure, but I'm glad we're getting to hear the other sides of this argument because I think it is important. I think all of these sides are relevant to the conversation.
It's critical. Look, here's what I love about guaranteed and viable, okay? When you have science, you should be able to teach your low learners and your high learners Because I'll tell you who really loses out are always the low learners, because they get stuck with a learning center that's focused on math and it ignores the rest of their goals. So what about their electives? I get that we have to draw in folks who want to do AP classes. And this won't affect AP because AP is your core, right? So you can take an AP social studies class. It does affect your ability to take electives, and that is going to hit journalism and music because people have to make choices. And I don't have an easy answer for that. I don't. I do believe very firmly that guaranteed and viable curriculum is the answer for accelerated courses non-AP. Because if you want to take an AP track, you get core credit for that, right? And if we believe in a guaranteed and viable curriculum, almost every single student should be able to take that same class and get both acceleration and the folks who are struggling would bring them up. Now, I get that we're far away from that. We're not, and if this is not the year, there's no way that I'm like hardlining to do X, Y, and Z. I do believe in the long-term commitment to guaranteed and viable curriculum because we are a public school. And forever in the history of public school, still, even though we're public, it is the folks at the top of the income scale that drive it. And I understand they have facility and they have agency and they have an ability to move things. And I don't disagree with that. That if you have a kid who wants to take all those things, all of us have to make some choices. So for example, you don't have to take PE. I fundamentally don't agree with that, but I also understand that people got to fit things in their schedule and maybe you can find a way to work that in. So I don't have a big answer to that, but I do think with our core curriculum, it's a work in progress. So whatever the transition is towards that, if it's 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road, that we work towards a thing where every kid who takes science, whatever your learning ability, is getting a guaranteed curriculum, that you are learning the basic core. And if you're accelerated, we find ways within our system to give you acceleration. And then AP is separate. Like if you go take AP, that's the college board, and that's the system you're into, and the colleges buy into that, and they're going to give you credit. So that I don't know if it'll impact AP. I mean, freshmen, because I can take AP social studies, or I could take regular social studies. What I'm saying is, if you take regular social studies non-AP, that should be able to address all of the learners, technically. That's the philosophy. That's the goal. And then if you want to take AP, you're getting the same credit, and then that is for those people who truly are going to double down and do all that extra work. That's just...
Okay, so I mean, I was referring to AP Science. So, I mean, it does limit. I mean, you might be taking 1 or 2 less AP Science in high school.
Right, because you can't get there because AP Chemistry, you have to take chemistry first, right, and so on. So yeah, it does limit. So I guess I would be in favor of hanging on to Earth, Space, and Science too, but I guess we're not being asked what we're in favor of necessarily. But I mean, I think.
But I think the input's helpful, guys. I mean, I think part of this part of the reason we're discussing it is because it was a lot easier for us to say yes to it when we had limited elective choices at the junior high level. But knowing that we are offering our own more robust program of studies for the middle schools, there's more choice for the students there. And to JP's point about guaranteed viable curriculum, I do think this was all a step in the right direction for the system, from the fact about skipping a class was the usual in the past to now it's a doubled up opportunity, whether it's at the 8th grade level or if they would double up later. The cohorting thing I was kind of discussing was not necessarily about saying that we should or shouldn't give kids an access to that, because I do think, all these points are relevant, right? I mean, we have great achievers in the district. We need to continue those opportunities. I mean, while we're at it, we're not talking about getting rid of 8th grade algebra, for the, a lot of questions I've gotten about that. Nobody's talking about removing those acceleration opportunities. I think the student experience part I was trying to mention with that is that it does de facto track the kids, right? The other open periods they have where they're not in the advanced math or the advanced science or the music class, they're going to naturally travel with the same kids throughout the day, right? There's not enough other sections to sprinkle them into because so much of their schedule is scripted by that. That's the balancing act where it gets hard with the schedule, where then it's a segment of our students have a different experience than what the student body is really reflective of. So that's just kind of an awareness thing to think about. But I do think, we continue to make incremental good steps that make sense. But the root of the reason we're probably prompting the change is because we didn't have many offerings, for middle school kids to have a choice from or junior high kids to have choice from. Now we do, right? So this one maybe made sense that it could wait till the high school. But if we feel like, hey, it's important enough to keep in, again, I think we can do that. So Carmen or Lucas, anything else you guys would add? Let's see. Yeah.
I learned a lot just by listening to you guys talk about it, because you contrasted science to the social studies. I mean, that's the kind of thing that I needed to hear about, right? So that was helpful to me. And I'm sure it's helpful to people who listen to the meetings. Like, we got to talk this stuff out.
Yeah.
I appreciate the conversation. And I don't mean to get heated, and it's not a hill to die on. But honestly, I believe in GVC, and I'm just glad we're on that path. And there are underpinning reasons for it. Again, and I appreciate our approach, that we're taking a measured approach, and we're talking about these things, and we're getting them out there to understand all perspectives.
That's why we have these meetings, right?
You're right.
Okay, all right.
I just want to give a little bit of my perspective, listening to the conversation, which is a learning opportunity for me anyway. I'm also reminded that these recommendations come about in large part because the staff, teaching staff, the administrative staff, have looked at these various issues themselves and are making some assessments about what they think is good for the entire student body. And that, to me, personally, is of some importance. We just finished a school board campaign at which we talked a lot about respecting the expertise of teachers. And I think that message resonated with the community, and I think that's something that I'm interested in incorporating into my decision-making process going forward here. Not to say that any opinion I heard from us is of not importance. That's not what I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with you on that, Director Eastham. I think something that Superintendent Degner and I discussed earlier was that this wasn't a decision that the current team had actually decided upon. This was something that was sort of in the works by previous teams, and that they, upon looking at it again, they were willing to rethink it. I don't know if you have any further comment on that. Matt.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I had shared, that, Lucas and Carmen, in fairness to them, I mean, this was some of their first look at this recommendation. This had been one we'd had. I think some of the reasons I tried to articulate to you were similar, about why we would still consider, staying with what was originally recommended. But I think there's compelling reasons on both sides. That's why we've struggled with it, right? And so, I mean, I just think it's a good one for us to talk out. And I think my work is to take it back to the team and probably rethink this a little bit, and then make sure we present something to you guys ahead of the program of studies that, we can either have further conversation about that, or that you guys can support that night. So
I also think that, Charlie, what you said is true, that we do as a board defer to our teachers' expertise and our director's expertise, but we also have people that asked us questions about it. So it's really good for us to talk this out and give the different sides so that the public gets their questions answered. It's not in any way us saying we don't trust or, want to defer to our experts. It's really, if I know 5 people that don't understand it, well, I'm going to bring it up because they contacted me, and that's what we're supposed to do.
That's a good point, Martha. Very good point.
Okay, does anyone have anything further to add on that discussion? Excellent. Okay, let's move on to the presentation portion. And Matt, will you be
I'm going to open this one up, please. So I'm going to quickly open it up and then turn it over to Adam. We're going to take all 3 of these items together for you this evening. And you're going to also notice that Adam has formatted some of these different than what you would have typically seen from either past annual financial health reports or quarterly financial reports. We think this reflects some of the conversation we had in the Financial Oversight Committee about monitoring expenditures and our revenues. And so you'll continue to see some things patterned after this. I'm sure we'll work to continue to refine and improve the system. A lot of this information that's included in these reports, as these would be the just next iteration of the timing come up, is also connected to, of course, your action item about SBRC exhibit approval. So I'm not imagining a whole lot of conversation during that action item, because if you have questions, this would be a good time to have those addressed. But of course, if you think of something after we work through this part, we're happy to answer them. But our idea was to present information to you here and then answer your questions so you could move on the action item when ready. So with that, I'll introduce Adam and let him take it away here.
Good evening, everybody. I am going to, like Matt said, be taking these three reports at the same time. It's a little different from what our normal quarterly financial reports will look like, but because of specific circumstances, especially related to the SBRC exhibit approval later on the agenda, kind of made sense to take these all at once rather than split them apart and create some redundancy there. So I'm actually going to start by talking about the certified annual report. This is a report that we are required to submit to the state in September, and that is a report that we did file with the state as required in September. It was filed a little bit late. That's one thing that we will be talking with the SBRC about, and actually an area that I wanted to start. Now, I will say there are 22 separate attachments on these three items, so I'm not going to go through all 22 of those for you. I'll try to keep it fairly brief, but I'm happy to address any questions that arise. In terms of the certified annual report, we have identified some reasons that was filed late. The biggest drivers of that are really related to some account coding issues, where the district's practice in the past was to do manual changes to where certain expenditures in particular and revenues were coded at the end of the year as we filed that report. And that was something where current staff didn't necessarily have all of the information about what was done manually at the end. And so we've submitted to the SBRC, and it's on the agenda for your approval tonight, a corrective action plan that identifies, among other items, cleaning up some of that account coding at the outset so that we are using the correct codes. We have things going to the correct places, both in terms of revenue and expenses throughout the year, so that that's not a process where manually at the end we're going in and doing cleanup. The other element that I think is really key to highlight is that one of the things that we haven't necessarily done is to take advantage of a tool that the state makes available to upload that report at any point throughout the year, identify errors. They have stage errors, stages 1 through 4, but we can identify sort of stage 1 through 3 errors, those top level errors throughout the year, get them cleaned up throughout the year. So again, as we approach the end of the year and that filing deadline, we're not scrambling. There are always going to be elements where we don't have complete information to submit those reports, you know, at any point throughout the year. There are certain items that aren't available until after we close the books on a fiscal year, and we can do some reconciliation work to get to the point that we know that we're going to be able to submit really a final product to the state. But at the same time, there are steps that we can take along the way to minimize the amount of work that has to be done kind of at the 11th hour. So those are steps that are detailed within that SBRC CAR corrective action plan. So if you want to learn more about what those are, dig into them. They're good for, you know, getting this report in on time as we move forward, but they're also just strong financial management practices in general to make sure that we're staying on top of reporting and that we're doing verification of our data. The other item that arises from the submission of our certified annual report is that that's really our submission to the state to say, here's where our revenues came from, here's what our expenses were, here, you know, categorized by area, that in those areas are defined by the state. And then it's also a compliance activity to make sure that we are following the state's rules as it relates to expenditures within categorical funds, overall expenditures. One of the things that we learned when we certified our report this year was that our unspent authorized budget, UAB, was negative for last fiscal year. So fiscal year 23, we certified a UAB of negative $474,032. And I'm actually going to pull up a document that goes into a little bit more detail on that to show you and walk you through in a second here. But one of the things that I do want to share about that, both for the board and for the public and anyone who's listening to the recording, is that there's a key difference here as it relates to how most organizations would think about having a negative balance. In most organizations, that would mean that your revenues were not sufficient to cover your expenditures along with any carryover in revenue that you had. And when school districts in Iowa look to balance our books, we're really talking about, not in the negative connotation way, we're really talking about balancing two sets of books. On the one hand, we have our cash that we're receiving as a district, what's flowing in, and then our expenditures. And that's the way that most organizations would look at, reconciling your books at the end of the year. In those terms, we have no issues. It's not a situation where we can't pay our bills. It's not a situation where we didn't bring in enough revenue to account for the expenditures that we generated. So that's one set of books, and in that one, we're fine. So in terms of the cash side of the equation, we have a positive solvency ratio. I'll talk a little bit about that in a few minutes here. But it's one of those things where that's one side, and that's what most organizations would look at. In Iowa, for schools, the state sets our budget authority level, and that's based upon formulas that are related to our enrollment, along with a number of other factors that contribute to that. And that's where we ended up negative. And so I wanted to dive into that just a little bit here before I talk about the SBRC exhibits related to that negative unspent balance. So I zoomed in a little bit here. I'll try to zoom in a little bit more so it's more readable on the screen. So essentially what this document is, this is our actual end of year financials for fiscal years 2018 through 2023, and then also projections for the current fiscal year through fiscal year 2029. And the rows I'm going to focus on are down here at the bottom, toward the bottom of this document. And I'm going to be focused particularly on unspent authorized budget, and then our expenditures and our maximum authorized budget. So as I said, the state sets our maximum authorized budget based upon a number of factors, and then our expenditures are really, controlled by us. We control what we spend money on, how much we spend. And then our unspent authorized budget is the difference of those two things for a fiscal year added to whatever our unspent authorized budget was from the previous year. So unspent authorized budget is cumulative. If you end one year with $2 million and then the next year you spend $2 million less than your authority, your UAB would be $4 million. It's cumulative, it adds together. So as we look at where we ended the previous fiscal year, we ended it at negative $474,032, and that was based upon expenditures of $209.2 million and a maximum budget authority of $208.8 million. So we exceeded that level, and that's something that will require us to, again, appear before the SBRC, which is the School Budget Review Committee, and provide both an explanation of why we were negative for fiscal year 23, and then also a corrective action plan related to correcting that situation, both for the current fiscal year we are in, and then fiscal years moving forward over the coming 5 years. So one other thing that I want to draw your attention to is, again, the two key variables are maximum budget authority and then our expenditures. So as we look to fiscal year 24, which is the year we are in, you'll see that that maximum budget authority amount is $196 million. That's down from 208.8 the previous year. So that's a decline of roughly $12.8 million. During the previous legislative session, the legislature approved 3% supplemental state aid. Basically, that's the percentage that your budget is allowed to grow in a nutshell. And so that amount went up. Our enrollment is based upon previous year enrollment, And so these figures are calculated based upon an enrollment increase of, I believe it's 43.1 students for last school year, but fiscal year 24. And so those would both lead to an increase in budget authority. The reason that it declined by this $12.8 million is almost entirely driven by federal funds coming off the books. So ESSER in particular, which were the federal COVID recovery dollars. This district spent $19 million in ESSER funds last year. And coming into this year, we had about $900,000 worth of COVID funds remaining. As I said, the formula is driven based upon enrollment and a per student funding model, but it's also really driven by things like federal grants, which when we spend money from a federal grant, it increases our authority at a 1-to-1 ratio. So that all adds up to a maximum authority for this year of $196 million. Coming into this year, we had already planned for a reduction in ESSER expenditures. We knew that that was something that would have to come off the books. We had a number of non-recurring expenditures that already came off the books. And then we also knew we were going to be in a tight financial situation, which is why you as a board discussed and approved budget reductions last year of roughly $8 million coming into this year. And so one of the things that we faced is that those did come in at a point where we were in a better position to handle this challenge. But we also had some expenditures last year that led to us being in a negative unspent situation, again, detailed within those attached SBRC documents. For example, increases in substitute teacher expenditures that were billed to the general fund that we didn't anticipate. And so that led to a situation where we really ended up with expenditures this year on track for closer to $198 million. Which helps frame some of the work that we did in the SBRC documents. So I'm going to back out for a second, and again, I'll be happy to answer any questions, and I can jump back into any document. I do want, before I talk about some of those SBRC documents in particular, just to make sure that there's clarity about some of these items. I'm not going to go through this entire 25-slide presentation, but I'd encourage you to do so in your free time if you're bored. But I do want to talk about a handful of key slides, and these inform the assumptions that we make as it relates to developing those budget forecasts and being able to forecast both current year and then also moving forward in terms of what our unspent balance is and what it will grow to be. So one of the things I want to talk about is state supplementary assistance rates. So this is SSA. It's basically the amount our budget is allowed to grow. And you can see here at the top, we have our trend of the past few years and what those rates were. So moving from 1% in FY19 to 2.3, 2.4 up to 3 this past, or for the current fiscal year. Our assumptions that we have used are based upon 2.5%. So that's something that we've talked to ISFIS, which is a state group that we work with as it relates to financial planning. They've recommended that 2.5% rate, but it's something that's variable. The legislature can set that higher, they can set it lower, and it can vary year to year. So that's something that certainly we'll want to keep a close eye on, what's emerging from the legislature in terms of that being set, what the governor recommends at the outset of the legislative session, so that we have as clear an idea as possible and we can base our planning on the closest to accurate numbers that we can get. I'm going to skip down to this next slide. This is our enrollment slide. As a district, we've been used to growing between 150 and 250 students per year for a long time. That's a trend that even as of last year we discussed with our demographers was really slowing down, and we were looking at moving to a more stable enrollment situation. This year, especially due to the ESA program, the Educational Savings Accounts, the voucher program, we ended up with a decrease. This isn't certified, by the way. The state certifies in December, but we're pretty confident that this is close. With a decrease of 61.1 students in our certified enrollment count. I do realize actually now that I have a formula error. I think I shifted by 1, so these numbers on the next bullet are not correct. The net open enrollment for this year is actually projected to be about plus 15 students. We are positive open enrollment net And that's a difference from negative 44.5 last year, which is what our net was, which is an increase of 59.6 students in terms of open enrollment. So those two numbers almost completely counteract each other. So open enrollment net is not included in certified enrollment. So we're down roughly 61 students in certified, but we're up 59 and a half students FTE in terms of open enrollment. So our enrollment situation is one that's really pretty stable. For the purpose of budget forecasting, we forecast a negative 0.2% change year to year. So it's essentially a decline of about 30 students per year going forward. All right. I'm gonna jump down to slide 12 here. I briefly wanted to touch on property tax rates. These are not set in stone and they will be influenced heavily by decisions that are made. But based upon this model as it stands right now, we saw a pretty substantial spike in our property tax rate for FY24. That's related primarily to some management fund costs that we incurred for this past year. We do expect that those rates will decline again. And as we get to a healthier financial situation, we're actually able to reduce our cash reserve levy and see those declines, impact our rates pretty significantly as we move forward. So we had really maintained an average right around that, high 14s rate for a number of years in a row. And our models show us getting back to those rates after a period here where we rebuild some of our cash reserves as we incurred more expenses last year than we expected. But that's something where we don't expect a substantial increase in tax rates going forward. And then I'm going to jump down to slide 20 really quick. And I wanted to talk a little bit about solvency ratio. This is another factor. So as you consider unspent authorized budget, that's basically the amount that you don't spend that you're authorized to spend. It carries forward and is cumulative. And you can look at districts having healthy ratios. That's something I know that the board will be discussing here soon in terms of what our ratio should be and what we should be targeting long term. Solvency ratio is more like what other organizations look at when they're looking at cash versus what's going out. And so solvency is essentially what percentage of your revenues are left at the end of the year after you've paid all your bills. And so you can think of these kind of added to one as if we needed one exactly to get to our budget amount. If we are at 4.4 for FY24, that means that we have 4% beyond what we needed to get to our full amount that we need to pay all of the costs that we'll incur. So again, you can see based upon the current forecast, we do say that rising over the coming several years, getting into that 5 to 10, actually a little bit higher than that percent range. That's considered a pretty healthy range by external groups. And again, that's a discussion that I think the board will have coming up here soon. So as you look at what type of guidance you want to establish for ICCSD in terms of where we want those rates to exist. And then I already talked about this one, but this is just putting it in chart form. It's a little bit easier to see. Based upon our current forecasts and our current recommended actions that we'll present to the SBRC in December. FY23, that's the year we dipped to negative. FY24, we moved to just barely positive. That's about $600,000, which is tight. Typically, districts are looking for anywhere between 5 and 15%. And to put that in perspective, 5 to 15% of our budget would be $10 to $30 million. And so we're pretty tight where we are. But this does show us growing to over 4 million. I think that's about 4.6 million for FY25, up to about 9 million, and then over 12 million for the years FY27 through 29. So those are all some things that I hope will be helpful as you look at our budget picture and try to get a good sense of exactly where we're at. And then briefly, I do want to touch upon those SBRC reports I've referenced several times. For both the CAR submission deadline, we have a cover letter and a corrective action plan. The corrective action plan is the more substantive of those and goes into detail about exactly what we are implementing to make sure that's not a situation that we face again. And then the NUB attachments are related to the negative unspent balance. So again, cover letter, a corrective action plan goes into detail as it relates to what we plan to do, knowing that that's something that's going to be a little bit flexible based upon board decisions, based upon feedback from the community, from our staff. And so those are things that we'll want to take into account, but this is the plan that we'll present at our meeting in December with the SBRC. The detailed report goes into some detail about exactly how we ended up in that negative situation. So that provides some more information there. And then the Exhibit 1 and Exhibit 2 templates are both requirements from the SBRC that basically just step through what were our expenditures, for the past 10 years, what were our revenues for the past 10 years, what are our staffing levels, things like that. So they provide some information there. So with that, I would open it up for any questions that you have.
I have one question about the UAB numbers. You said that most districts their goal is to have it between, what did you say, 5 and 15%?
5 and 15.
Do you think that's going to change as, funding continues to be a challenge, or is that sort of just a standard that it just seems like a really high number when you're already dealing with such limited funding?
I think that's ultimately why we want it to be a board discussion to really establish what that will be for ICCSD. One thing, it used to be that everyone statewide just said 10 to 15%, that's what you need. As we've seen districts' financial circumstances change, state levels of support change, I think that more than, those numbers necessarily just always coming down, I think you'll see a divergence between especially smaller rural districts where actually building up a higher UAB is easier to do. There are districts in Iowa that have more than 100% UAB ratio. And then larger urban districts like us, where those budget challenges, especially with rising costs of doing business, really create some pressure that make that 10 to 15% range difficult to maintain. Not impossible, but at the same time difficult, and there are trade-offs in order to get there and maintain that at that level.
It's definitely an art. You have your work cut out for you for this, I think.
Yep.
Yeah, I would remind the public that we did already go into this in depth at a financial committee meeting prior to this meeting, so that's why we aren't going to be asking very many questions. Apparently, we don't have very many. It's because we've had a couple of opportunities to dig in with Director Kurth on this stuff. So thank you for being so detailed and explaining this stuff so well.
And it was all explained very well, plus your documents are self-explanatory, so.
Thank you.
A lot of explaining in those documents, and a lot of documents. I don't think this is why you got into education, but it's a great job. And, this is something, I mean, at the end of the day, if there's a school district with 100% UAB, I bet they're not competitive on the teacher salary end of things. I mean, that's, and this is really, we're spending 86% of our budget on teachers. And so that's where, this is where it is. So, and I, as somebody who's been in this seat for a while, and certainly where we've never had a negative unspent balance, and then on the other side of the negotiating table, I've always been comfortable with where our unspent balance has been as long as it's moving in the right direction. Now, having been through a couple of these budget cuts in a row, it's hard. And it's hard to always be in this sort of state of what are we going to look out for. So, I can just stay, in the past I've said I'm super comfortable right around 5%. And I can just say right now 15, we're not going to do what we need to do with the kids in our district with 15, right? But if we're at a healthy 5 and we know that that's somewhere in 10, that's just kind of where I can be at, having moved up from where I've been in the past, being a lot more comfortable closer to 5. And now, just because having been part of these budget cut discussions, that takes a lot of energy out of your system year after year after year after year to constantly be offering early retirement and constantly be, that it'll be, if we're closer between 5 and 10, somewhere around 7, so that we don't have to keep coming back. Because at the end of the day, one thing I don't think is going to change in this district is we want that money to be as close to the kids as possible. And the way to do that is to pay teachers. That's the way. And we want to remain competitive. So it is a delicate dance. I can appreciate that. And to use the word again, you know, when I saw that we had a negative unspent balance, I was apoplectic. I was quite angry because I hadn't seen it before. And it's okay, right? Mistakes were made. What I feel really good about, though, coming on the other side of that, is now with all of this detail, I can see, you know, this is an opportunity for us to do things better than we've done in the past. And every once in a while, you just need a reset, and you got to get work smarter, not harder. And I think that we're heading in that direction. And so I really appreciate the folks at the helm taking us there. So I will be really interested to see what the SBRC says.
And again, Adam, as I understand it, the negative unspent balance that we're focusing on is a number generated by the state's limitations on spending.
That is correct, yeah.
It's not a number that's in our bank.
Correct, yes. Yep.
The one thing I'll just connect back to is what Director Pilcher-Hayek said. I mean, kind of the introduction of this topic. It would be helpful for the public to listen to the Financial Oversight Committee meeting at 5 o'clock, just from an introduction to this issue standpoint. And then it's reflected in Adam's SBRC exhibits about how the problem presented, the action steps we'll take. And so it's a little bit piecemealed here for part of this conversation as you guys understand it, that at a deeper level now. But if you were just listening to this meeting, I'm sure there's some dots that are left unconnected. And so just going back to that, from internal staff organization, we communicated with administrators this afternoon. We'll have a full staff communication next week. So I feel like we're working to make sure key stakeholders are brought into the group on that. But for anybody that's having a hard time connecting, that's listening to this, I would go back to that 5 o'clock meeting and start there.
And I think it's worth noting, too, our property tax rate has remained steady. And to Charlie's point, this isn't something where we can just raise property taxes to make this up. It's not a problem of our revenue. It's a problem of our authority. And so that, just so people know, we can't just raise property taxes to make this up, nor would we suggest that. I'm not saying that, but I've heard that, well, why don't you guys just go get the money? Because we can't. We're limited by the state.
Yes. It's a function of our enrollment, which has been affected by the education savings accounts. Thank you, Adam. We can move on to the action items. First up is the 300 series. Is there anyone who would like to make a motion?
I move we approve the 300 series policies.
Second.
Okay, we're ready to vote.
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you, Kim. Next up is the Grantwood AEA Director, District 3.
I move that we vote for Lynn Cannon as Director of District 3 for the Grantwood AEA Board of Directors.
Second.
Kim, we're ready to vote.
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you, Kim. And lastly, the SBRC exhibit approval.
I move we approve the SBRC documents.
Second.
Kim, we're ready to vote.
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you, Kim. And moving on to the Director Liaison report, it looks like Ruthina and Lisa were both very busy, but not here tonight, and the rest of us are here.
We were busy too. What kind of leader is that? My usual reminder to the public that not all of us always provide everything we did.
Do you have something you would like to share, Director?
Don't put me on the spot.
Okay.
No.
And does any director have anything they would like to share? It was a busy month, which is why we didn't have time to write it all down.
I would say that when we look at onboarding new members, that we talk about what is to be included in the director liaison reports because it's still unclear to me exactly what we're supposed to include. So maybe add that to our checklist. Because, you know,
Yeah.
sometimes we include like, I mean, I go to every single sports game I could go to, but I don't think I'm supposed to put that on there. But some, you know, everybody's got different things they include. Bottom line is, I think everyone on this board loves to go to as many district events as possible, which is pretty great.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'd say we're a very active board.
Yeah.
Good points. Okay, and then moving on to the agenda setting. Policy and governance, on November 28th, we'll be reviewing policy primers in the 400 series.
Jane, I wonder, I feel some obligation to respond to some of the comments that were made by students tonight, covering a variety of areas. But I also recognize that we don't necessarily have a super duper policy or a super duper process for doing that. So I wonder if we could ask the absent president and vice president and Matt to formulate some notions of how to respond to some of those areas at the next meeting, either as discussion items or maybe as a work session. I'm not sure which.
Yeah, I'd be happy to provide some information via email too, and then we can talk further about it if you want to agenda it and if we'd want to have some further conversation. So that's very, recent decision for us that was referenced, and so I'm happy to provide some context and we can decide if we want to talk more about it.
But again, I'm not sure what the sentiment of the five of us here may be. So.
I would like to be able to provide some follow-up as well. I think that's important. Thanks, Charlie, for bringing that up.
I agree. Okay, so is there anything else for the regular meeting on November 28th? And or the organizational meeting?
A couple things I would mention at the Financial Oversight Committee meeting, we mentioned a policy. I'd like to show that policy to you all at P&G on the 28th. And so we'll, if that's okay with you, Director Finch, we'll put the primers 400s and that financial oversight policy proposal in front of you. And then just as a reminder, we have Ed Showcase and Equity Update that night. Equity Update will be about equity walks related to HRS, and the Ed Showcase will be our all-state music that we typically do in November. And then I guess that's December when we have all the checks. Is that right? That's not till December. Yeah, that we have several check presentations that evening. So
Is that should we add the agenda like complaining that we have school until the day before Christmas, or is that no? Okay.
That would have been the calendar approval.
My kids
Really
have
out,
been
though,
harping on me about that. But that's not an agenda item. Okay, got it.
Get them to come to the.
we did build in the 2-hour early release before break.
Oh, never mind.
Yeah.
I'll tell the kids.
And there is no education committee meeting this month would be the other thing of note, that we're not doing that on the third Tuesday this month.
Well, I could tell your kids they have to come and do a comment period.
Yeah, that's what we'll do.
No. I just,
But don't tell them I said that.
I would like to thank my colleagues for affording me this opportunity. The view is much different here in the middle, and I'm sure you're wondering if maybe I have my sights set on something higher, and I want to let you know that yes, I do indeed someday intend to take over the district's Instagram account for the day. Please. Wow. No? I think she said no. Okay, it's okay. I was joking. It's a goal. Okay. Can we have a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Second.
Aye.
Thank you very much.